Hey there, I am Barb Higgins, and this is 1,000 Tiny Steps. In this podcast, I share my stories of love, loss, triumph, and tragedy as I continue to retrace my steps and ponder what led to the death of my daughter Molly. By doing so, I hope to not only help myself, but to bring purpose and possibility to those who listen. If you are ready to laugh, cry, shake your head in disbelief, then tie, buckle, face up, or slip on your shoes and join me as we begin our 1,000 Tiny Steps.
Hey everybody, Barb Higgins here, welcoming you to episode 163 of 1,000 Tiny Steps. As I begin this recording on Monday morning, September 7th, so I'm a bit behind, it is an absolute downpour outside. And as someone who is seldom a middle of the road kind of person, although politically I think I'm kind of middle of the road, however, I love the hot, muggy weather and I love a good storm. So a downpour is oddly soothing, even though I'm not someone that likes rainy days too much. My house is so dark. If I turn off all the lights, I need a flashlight to get around, even with all the windows. Anyway, welcome back. Welcome to this fabulous podcast that is mine. We're in season 10 now, and I'm doing episode 2 on a series of episodes on lying. And I don't remember what it's called, but I've mentioned it before. There's some phenomenon when you buy an orange car because you've never seen an orange car. Suddenly, everywhere you go, you see orange cars. And it isn't that they suddenly appear, it's just that you notice them because they're existent in your subconscious now. It's a pretty fascinating concept. It's like when you find out you're pregnant, and then pretty soon all you see are pregnant people everywhere. Since I've started talking about lying, of course, our phones listen to us, right? So I'm giving all of these recommendations on manipulation of truth and lies and all this kind of stuff. I've also put it out there on my social media for people to give me examples of lying, but it's become evident to me how much we all lie. Now, let me be clear, because I know a lot of you are going to be very indignant and say, I don't lie. But we all do, because a lie is the opposite of truth. And sadly, much of truth isn't necessarily black and white. My truth around something might be different than someone else's truth. Now, certain things are unchangeable in terms of true or false. Rain is wet. Okay, rain is never going to be dry. It's always going to be wet. So someone who tells me you'll stay dry in a rainstorm is not manipulating a truth into something that will ever be believable or usable. You'll get wet. That's all there is to it. Oh, bring an umbrella. Now you've manipulated the truth. The rain falls on the umbrella, you stay dry. But rain still makes you wet. So that's an example of something that you really can't change. But then you can have beliefs or ideas or thought processes that can look at truth as something that's sort of manageable and expandable and changeable. When I get angry about something, my level of anger might be very different than somebody else's. So I could say, I'm not that angry, when in fact I sound furious, whereas somebody else would be twice as angry as me and not be yelling at all. So now we're manipulating the definition of anger. What does anger mean? Am I so mad I could punch somebody? Am I just irritated? So there's the truth of anger can be very, very wishy-washy. And I don't know if that's a great example, but this is what I'm finding out. Anyway, before we get started on this episode of lies, which is lies that we tell, right? I never ever did a sort of summary of the second 6 steps of the 12 steps like I did in the first. And in looking for a piece of blank paper to write down things for today, I came across what I had written. And so I'm going to read it just because it'll make me feel better, because I have to say I'm in a crabby mood. I had a tough weekend. It sort of fits into this whole idea of lying. Once I had a more complete understanding of myself, I humbly asked God, my version, to remove my shortcomings. Why do we need to ask, I wondered? Well, I came to learn that there is ownership in the asking. We identify through this process shortcomings that will be best turned over. Now that we are clear on this, we look outward. How did these now removed shortcomings contribute to our treatment of others? So we make a list of everyone we may have hurt. And then we become willing to make amends to all of them. So I'm going through steps 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep, payback is a bitch. Or is it? We are not tasked with meaningless apology giving. We are tasked with the process of becoming willing. So it's actually a room full of bitches. It's for all bitches. We then call upon our skillful means. We look at our list and create just the right amend for each individual. Some will be in person. Some will not. All will be just right. Thinking a break might be in order, we are then asked to continue living in the reality of self-reflection and personal inventory taking. There's no break for the recovering alcoholic. We must see and identify our wrongs immediately, seriously. This must be overkill, except it isn't. It's the creating of new habits. From here, we develop an alternate mind. An alternate mind. We seek through prayer and meditation for knowledge, that right knowledge of God's plan for us. Oh, and the power to carry it out. Following it, another spiritual awakening, we then give it all back. See, we use all of this to help other alcoholics. We walk our walk, we talk our talk. We walk our talk. What comes around goes around. It's magical. We also practice what we preach. That was my little summary of the second set of 6 steps in the 12-step recovery process. So I'm reading it now because one of the biggest things, I've mentioned this before, that helped me when I did AA in my late 20s and early 30s was the honesty thing, lying, right? Like I realized that for me, the lies I told to others and to myself were all about self-preservation. Self-preservation. That's why I said things that weren't true, or manipulated the truth, or managed the truth, or kept the truth secret, or only shared the truth with some people as a means of self-preservation. And it was both to protect myself from others, and I think a big part was to protect myself from what I knew to be true and didn't want to admit. I know for me as a little girl, it was really hard for me to wrap my head around what was happening to me in the sexual abuse. I know that day to day, what we were taught as little girls, both at home and in school, was very different than what little boys were taught. And so that was confusing. And I also know that we were taught to be honest, but I had 2 adults in my life that participated in actively lying to one another and putting me in the middle of those lies and asking me to join in. So truth for me became not black and white at all, but what somebody told me it was, which is gaslighting. And the gaslighter, the person manipulating the truth to the person they're trying to control, has no interest in truth at all, only interest in to continue what they're doing, whether it's to hide something bad or to continue a manipulation. It is not surprising that some of my most intense friendships and relationships were around narcissistic type people, because these are people who have a very set idea of truth through their eyes, and they want to manipulate people into living their truths. The scary part about a narcissist, though, is once they get you to do it, they hate you because you're weak and meaningless, and the challenge is over, and they have to find their next person. When I look back now on it, it's mind-boggling to me. And I have to be very careful now to avoid those friendships. I have to be honest, I'm pretty lonely right now. I have 2 or 3 people in my life that I really am willing to put myself out there for. But it's amazing to me when I really sit back and analyze the honesty and the truth in my relationships, how minimal it is. My big social media question for this episode was as follows. What are some lies you told your kids or other people? And I have to be honest, they're no different than the lies they were told. We all grew up with these little lies from our parents. And then when we became parents, we did the very same thing. The little tapes play in our head, right? You might have changed the nature of the lie, but the reasons for them were the same, to either protect our kids or manipulate them into a set of behavior patterns that was beneficial. So let me give you some examples. Probably the biggest one was how old you could be when you had your first kiss. So I made up this law, told Gracie and Molly that it was illegal to kiss before you were 35 if you were a girl. So they believed it. They didn't understand, how old were you when you met daddy? Well, I was 30 when I met daddy. How old were you well, we got married when I was 35, 36. So, all was good. And they bought it until they realized, wait a minute, teenagers date, and Cinderella got kissed before she was 35. And they started to figure it out. The number of moms that told their kids that kissing couldn't happen until a much later age than it would was prolific. And I think that comes out of a fear of romance. We look at our kids as little and we don't want to think of them as, growing up and, kissing. Also safety. I know while both boys and girls need to be safe in that realm, it is much more dangerous for girls in regard to sexual manipulation and sexual assault. That's a big sort of lie that was very, very prevalent. The other ones, there were some around food. So I had a mother that said she told her kids they were allergic to soda and candy, that if they ate them, they would have a bad reaction. So they didn't eat it because, food allergies are enough now that people believe them. That's probably not the best lie to tell because eventually they're going to figure out that they aren't. Maybe though, by then they won't have a taste for it. I don't know. I never ever lied to Gracie and Molly about food. It's interesting where we decide to be honest. So, well, let me get through my list of lies and I'll talk about me with Gracie and Molly. A cousin of mine said that the pizza aliens would abducted her pizza on the way home and ate a slice if she came home from picking up the pizza and a slice was missing. I thought that was pretty good. Pregnancy ones were funny. I have a friend who told her youngest that the reason her belly was giant is she had a pterodactyl in there. And, when she came home from the hospital with a baby, that was a sad surprise. Probably the biggest one, though, were manipulations around mystical figures. Santa, the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, all of these mystical characters that play a significant role in the lives of children, especially in America. One of the biggest ones was finding people that looked like Santa and making believe they were Santa. So I had one mom who her father-in-law, what she did was she changed her father-in-law's contact information and her phone to Santa and had a picture there. So whenever he would call, Santa's picture would come up. Or she could say, look, I'm going to call Santa. And her father-in-law was in on this. He would get on the phone with her son and say, I hear you're not being good, da, da, da. So it totally worked to the point where if the father-in-law ever called and her son saw the phone and saw that it was Santa, he'd be like, hey, I haven't done anything bad. And she had to just say that maybe he was checking up on him. That was a prolific one. Other ones were a lot around the Tooth Fairy, that if your room wasn't clean, the Tooth Fairy wouldn't bring, the presents. They don't come in storms. If it's a stormy night, they might not come, all of these things around manipulating behavior of children so that Santa will bring presents. The elf on the shelf won't give a bad message to Santa, and the Tooth Fairy will, in fact, put money or trinkets under your pillow. For me, with that, Molly had this weird tradition around saving her teeth. She didn't want the Tooth Fairy to take them. And so I'm like, well, just tell her, and she won't. And it came from, she had saved up all these teeth. Now, when Molly and Gracie got money, Gracie would put it aside and Molly would spend it immediately. And then when Gracie finally wanted to spend hers, Molly would get angry that Gracie wasn't sharing, not realizing she'd already spent her half. Like if they both got a gift card to Target and Molly used hers right away and Gracie hadn't used hers, Molly wanted Gracie to share hers with her. It's like, no, that's not how it works. There was a time Molly needed money for something and she had this whole bucket of teeth. And so she put all those teeth under her pillow, thinking that the Tooth Fairy would give her a ton of money. She came downstairs and she looked really upset and she wouldn't tell me why. And Gracie was in on it, but she also wouldn't tell me why. And so finally, later in the day, I just said, sweetie, you need to tell me what's going on here. And she's like, well, I left all my teeth under my pillow because I really want some money for whatever it was. And when I woke up this morning, they were there. The Tooth Fairy didn't come. And so I just wept. I'll never forget it. She used the word wept. So I quickly said to her, sweetie, the Tooth Fairy is never going to come into this house without my permission. They're very respectful of safety and boundaries, and they're not going to come in here without permission. So that made her feel better. I also said, look, just because you save a teeth doesn't mean you get money again. You didn't regrow it and lose it again. So that you can't use that. What is it you need money for? We had a whole conversation around money and all that sort of thing. It was a wonderful learning experience, but from then on out, I would remind them, you need to understand certain protocol has to be followed or those mystical creatures won't come. About 2 months before Molly died, Easter was at the end of March. So it was actually like 6 weeks, not even. Easter of 2016, I said to the girls, the Easter Bunny is not going to come if you don't leave your Easter trees in front of the door. And they just looked at me like, Mom, and so for me, this was keeping a part of a happy time of my life continuing. And I said, you don't have to put them out there, but the Easter Bunny, whoever you think he or she isn't going to come if you don't. Knowing full well that I was going to put all the stuff out. But I remember coming home and Kenny and I were still separated at this time. It wasn't my weekend, but it was a holiday. And so I wanted to make sure. So I stayed here and I saw the trees and it made me weep. It made me so happy because I just, wanted them to be little girls forever. And so they put them out. And so, of course, I did the whole Easter egg hunt and candy and the jelly beans that you throw in the grass and the lollipops grow. All of it. We did all of it. And it was a wonderful Easter. So much of what we do with our kids in terms of honesty, I don't think is malicious or mean. However, it creates It's a bit of gaslighting because we're taking our children's questions about how the world works and we're utterly manipulating it to make our job of raising them better. Now, does that mean we shouldn't encourage our kids to believe in things? No. When Gracie and Molly got big enough to question it, I didn't insist that a big giant white man flew around. I said that little kids needed concrete examples of magic, that if they couldn't see it, they couldn't believe in it. And then we would talk about the wind, and you don't see the wind, but you see the leaves blow. And that the magic of Christmas and Santa was invisible, but that I truly believed it existed. And so that was good enough for them for a while. And oftentimes, I must be fully honest, in believing in the magic as an adult, there were some hard Christmases where I wasn't sure how I was going to pull off certain presents or make it work. And out of the magic of the universe, certain things would come into play or something would work. And I would always just say, thank you, Santa. Because I felt like love was that higher power, that universal connection. I could call it Santa at Christmas. Again, though, there really isn't some big fat dude with a beard that flies around in a sleigh with reindeer. You know what? Sorry if your kids are listening, I'm giving it all away. But we create that image because little kids can see it in their heads. When I look at this list, it's all the same things that our parents told us. The park is closed. We have to go home. Okay, the park isn't closed. Don't go to Dairy Queen the day it opens because they used up last year's ice cream. I'm not sure what the motive behind that one might have been. Maybe to just push off Dairy Queen for a little while, or maybe not have to wait in a long line because it's the first day that Dairy Queen is open. I never heard that one. I had a friend who was convinced her grandchildren that certain songs on the radio that she wrote. Like she'd sing them and they'd ask a song, oh, I wrote that song. And she would claim that she wrote it, or famous scenes from movies that she was responsible for creating. I think that's pretty funny. Another really funny one I liked was a friend of mine's son came home from school and asked what flipping the bird meant, the middle finger, because he had seen it at school. And she said, oh, that means you love playing with Barbie dolls. Now, there's nothing wrong with boys playing with Barbie dolls, but he didn't want to go around announcing to the world that he played with Barbie dolls. That's one of those playground bully type things, right? She said she never saw him flip the bird. I think that's funny. So these are ways that we just manipulate our kids. But when I look at and research lying and truth and manipulation, there is no time in history that truth hasn't been altered, colored, rearranged, rewritten, and manipulated to push the agenda of the person claiming it's true. This becomes big, right? This becomes religious truth. This becomes political truth. This becomes gender truth or biology truth. This becomes planetary truth. If you look at all of the things political parties argue about, you can take the same issue and listen to both sides and see truth in it. You can also see ridiculous ignorance and willingness to believe what you want to believe to push what you think is right. What do we do with that? Who decides what's right? Who decides what's wrong and what to do with that? And that's when I, get into the seriousness of this season. So today, now that we've looked at all the little ways we lie, I'm going to talk a little bit about my life. Because in my life, it's funny, I remember it. I actually haven't told a lot of lies. As a child, I wasn't a liar. I was a secret keeper. I was trained at an early age that most truths were best left undiscussed. So I have, aspects of my childhood I still haven't been fully honest with my family about because it would hurt people in my family. So here the victim protects the abuser, right? That's an extreme example of truth manipulation. So I know that my first lie, I don't remember it distinctly, but my mother loves telling the story of it. So I was maybe 3, like Jack's age, and I had taken some scissors and I had cut holes in these white socks of mine. And I had put the little hole, I was at the windowsill in my room, and my mother found the socks with the holes or the scissors. And she said, Barbara, did you cut holes in your socks? And apparently I looked at her and said, no, I was looking at my socks and the holes came out of my socks and just flew away. So I made up this whole story about not cutting holes in my socks, that they had magically done it by themselves and that the little pieces of socks had just flown away. Of course, there were the scissors and there were the pieces of sock in the little windowsill area. I don't remember if I got in trouble for that or what, but my mother got a big kick out of it. The next thing I remember is I found a black permanent marker. And you know how those things smell so good? And so I went around our downstairs because I just wanted to color with it. I wanted to see what it would feel like. We had this metal, the doorbell, when you rang the doorbell, it was a turn. So on the inside of the door was a metal like bell. and there was a bell in it. And so when somebody rang the doorbell, it made a noise. So it was smooth. So I took the marker and I drew like a circle on it, and it was so smooth. So then I went to like all the downstairs mirrors and I wrote on the mirrors. Now I was foolish enough to write my name. So my mother was livid. Of course, I got in big trouble. I'll never forget. I got a spanking for that. I was a spanking generation where you got hit, and that stuff is hard to get off. But I liked the smoothness of it. And I do remember saying that I didn't do it. That why would I write my own name if I did it? I would have written somebody else's name, which means whoever wrote it wasn't me. Like I really tried to get out of it. It was me. But I did lie about it. I have a really good memory. And the lies that come to mind for me are lies that I told or secrets that I kept to protect my mom and my dad, because it was clear to me that when the truth came out of my mouth, there was always a big fight. And I've talked about that in past episodes. I also know when I was in high school and I was involved in that relationship with my teacher, my first romantic sexual relationship with a man 17 years older than me, who was a teacher at my high school, there were times that I would want to be with him and I would make up lies about where I was going. I would make them vague enough that I didn't have to include anyone else in them because I didn't want to include them in that. But I would say I was going someplace that I wasn't. Or I would go and spend some time. Now, I also grew up when I was in high school, we didn't all have cars. Hardly anyone had a car that they drove. You would use your parents' car when they would let you. So if I wanted to spend a Saturday with Bridget, I'd hop on my bike and ride the 10 miles to her house on my bike. It was no big deal. That's what you did. If we all wanted to go downtown, we'd all meet at my house because I lived closest to downtown. Their parents would drop them off or they'd ride their bikes to my house and we'd walk. That was just what we did. It was very, very different. So it was easy. And there were no cell phones and no social media and no internet. So you could be someplace and not tell somebody where you were going and they couldn't find you. They would have to, call around on the landline to try to find somebody who knew where you were. So it was easy for me to disappear for hours at a time. It was Easter Sunday and we're at my grandmother's having Easter dinner. And I said I had to go to the track and go running or something. And I did. I went there. I went to the track and did my workout. But I took the long way home and I went and visited my teacher friend. And I spent like 3 or 4 hours there. So were my parents upset with me? Of course they were. I remember another time when I was no longer involved with the teacher and I had this other boyfriend who was also quite a bit older than me. And I had gone out for a run and I ran into him. And so I ended up going to his house and spending a few hours at his house. And I went home and my parents had thrown a surprise birthday party for me. And of course, had been there for like an hour and a half and I wasn't there. I got screamed at. And I had said, well, I told you I was going running, but I didn't know. First of all, I didn't know the party was happening. But I was gone for 3 hours. I wasn't gone for 1 hour. So that's a time that being dishonest really bit me in the tush because my parents had planned to cook out for me and I wasn't there. So yeah, that was, those things come into play as lies. So why was I lying? Well, because I wanted to see somebody that deep inside I knew I probably shouldn't, because I was engaged in this secret relationship with somebody else that had more power than me. It's a whole living a double life. And I think as abused kids, we grow up living double lives because what happens in the house stays in the house. So you have your at-home life and you have your public life. And oftentimes those are two very different lives. An abused child also looks at their abuser and knows what they're like when they're abusing and then what the rest of the world thinks of them. And I remember when I finally came clean about my father's abuse, one of the reasons I was told to keep it secret is that nobody would believe me, that my father had a good, daddy has a reputation in town and this could ruin it. Well, okay. So I'll just keep quiet about what happened to me to protect his reputation. And I look at the pressure put on rape victims to be quiet because of the damage that will happen to the rapist, and you look at how men in society get away with that because women are trained to own it, own the abuse, to own the attack, and to own the fallout. That's pervasive. So as fun as these little lies are to tell, it's important always in the process of kids growing up to be clear about, the fact that, yes, I was manipulating the truth to control you and maybe set boundaries around that. In the process of all of this, when I asked Siri, why do people lie? The main 3 reasons that people tell lies are to preserve self-esteem, to avoid conflict, and manipulate others. So preserving self-esteem, that could be saying that you did your homework, raising your hand and saying you did your homework every night when you didn't, or telling your parents that you did it when you didn't. Yes, of course I did. You want to impress them. So you make things up about yourself that aren't true. avoid conflict. So I know that I kept secret about things because I didn't want to fight. So a bigger one might be, I remember going to visit Kenny's parents once and we're chatting away and talking about voting Democrat. And Kenny had never told his parents that he was a registered Democrat. He just didn't. His parents were staunch Republicans. And his father was so disappointed. And when his dad left the room, Kenny was a bit upset with me, like, why would you say that? I'm like, why can't you be who you are in front of your parents? But wasn't my place. Kenny kept that lie to avoid conflict. Kenny is an absolute conflict avoider, and people like that can be easy to take advantage of. And then to manipulate others. And that would be my mother telling me that if I told, nobody would believe me. A lot of people would believe me. Why to manipulate others? So much of what Roy told me over the years was used to keep me absolutely where he wanted me to be. When he was angry at me, he would tell me that everything was my fault. And then when I came around to his side and was ready to pack my bags and move 2 hours south, he had 50 realities that meant I should stay home for now. When I look back on it now and the back and forth, and again, who knows what was going on in his life and what his childhood was like, or any of the people that I've had these situations with. This is what Siri had to say when I asked her, why do people lie to themselves? It has been theorized that humans are susceptible to self-deception because most people have emotional attachments to beliefs, which in some cases may be irrational. Some evolutionary biologists, such as Robert Trivers, have suggested that deception plays a significant role in human behavior, and more generally speaking, in animal behavior. One deceives oneself to trust something that is not true, as to better convince others of that truth. This is pretty intense. That's a pretty intense saying. I'm going to read it one more time. It has been theorized that humans are susceptible to self-deception because most people have emotional attachments to beliefs, which in some cases may be irrational. So I'm going to explain that one right away. So religion comes to mind. You're raised Catholic, or you're raised Protestant, or you're raised Buddhist, and you're told things. You believe them, believe them, believe them. And then as you get older, your belief system starts to change, or you start to question what you've been taught in those beliefs. And you do research and you come to see that maybe these things aren't true at all, but you have such a strong attachment to that belief system that you ignore it, or you find ways around it, or you look for people who also feel that they need to keep believing what they believe, even though evidence might suggest otherwise. And so they write books about why what you want to believe is true. You can get any answer to any question you want. You can find somebody to give you their side of the issue on anything. Ask a Democrat, ask a Republican about global warming. You will get two impassioned answers that make them hold on to that belief, even though some of what they say might make no sense. Some evolutionary biologists, such as Robert Trivers, have suggested that deception plays a significant role in human behavior, and more generally speaking, in animal behavior. So this doesn't mean dogs and cats lie to each other. It's our animal behavior. Yes, we're humans, and so we're separate from animals because we have intellect. We have the ability to assess ourselves, right? Most animals function on instinct. Some animals are quite intelligent. Dogs are pretty smart. Dolphins, elephants, they have quite a high level of intellect. But at the end of the day, their major function is on instinct. We're taught as humans to not trust our instincts. Don't listen to your gut. This form of gaslighting is pervasive in any politically motivated agenda, any financially motivated agenda. We are trained and conditioned to believe that somebody in charge knows what they're saying to us, even if we know in our gut that it isn't. And that's the animal behavior piece. How do we rally a group of people and get them to behave like sheep, following the shepherd, right? How do we get them to behave like lemmings and run off the cliff? This is the animal side of deception. One deceives oneself to trust something that is not true. So I would tell myself all the time that I would never get abused again, that maybe it was a bad dream. It's okay, Barb, it was a bad dream. It won't happen again. It's okay. Clean your room. Do this, do this, do this. It wasn't true. It wasn't true. And enough time would go by that I could almost believe that it was only a bad dream and that it would happen again. So that was self-preservation for me. I think that mental illness and many forms of mental illness, this comes into play. Telling somebody they're going to be all right when you know they aren't. A parent who's losing a child to cancer, and there's no doubt this child is going to die in 6 months, if that. And the parent lives in a state of denial. Denial is a massive form of deception sometimes, time buying, to avoid the truth, to make you believe something isn't true that is. That's an extreme example, but I think they happen all the time. As I talk, I would love to hear what you think. One deceives oneself to trust something that is not true, as to better convince others of that truth. So this is where the manipulation comes into play. And basically, I find the best examples are power examples. I'm reading this amazing book right now called Whose Story Is This? And I bought it. I went to my local bookstore, Gibson's, and I went in and asked, look, I'm going to do a series of podcast episodes on lying. And what's a good book about lying? In this one, this woman talks about how the truth of the matter depends on who's telling the story, whose narrative it is, who's in charge of the truth sharing, right? So right now in this podcast, I'm in charge of the truth sharing, except I'm not going to sit here and tell you that what I say is true. I'm going to tell you why I think something might be true or the truth I see in it, because that's how I see it. This reminded me of a time I was in high school and we were coming home from track practice. We were walking from Memorial Field to Concord High. And there was a car accident involving a couple of motorcycles. And myself and two friends witnessed the whole thing. And we were separated to tell our story. And I told my story, exactly how I saw it. And it conflicted with what my friends Maggie and Bridget had seen. So the cop went running over, no, because I saw it completely honest, different than they did. The police said, okay, those two said that this is how it happened. And I said, no, not at all. What I saw was this, and this. From piecing it together, the difference was when we started watching what we saw. What I missed was the first action of the car. By the time I looked up, what Bridget and Maggie had already seen with the car had happened. All I saw was the motorcyclist's response, which made me think the motorcycle started it, because that's what I started to see. So I remember the police officer complimenting us on our willingness to analyze what we saw, to really get to the truth of what happened, because a lot of people would just stick to what they saw, which of course makes sense. But I didn't see it all. And so what I saw was accurate based on what I saw, but it wasn't right for me to assume that what I saw laid blame on the guy in the motorcycle rather than the guy in the car, because I didn't see the whole thing. How many times eyewitness testimony convinces a jury that something is not true that is, or that is true that isn't, unfortunately is one of the biggest problems in eyewitness testimony. Our vision of what we see is definitely marred by when we see it, our angle, and our mindset at the time we're seeing it, and what we bring into what we saw happening. And then the next thing is our memory. And I remember I was good friends with a teacher friend at Walker School, Steve, and he once said to me that memory is colored by emotion. So it's why when you have a family and you ask to remember a certain holiday or event, every memory will be completely different. And when you put it all together, you'll have the whole view of what happened. But you won't have that with each person's memory because they saw it through their eyes. That stuck with me for a long time because all of this plays into truth. What is truth? What's true and what isn't? What's a lie and what's the truth? Well, it depends on your definition of truth, right? So if I say blue is the color of the leaves on the trees, and this is my truth and I insist upon it, then anyone who calls those trees, the tree leaves green, is a liar. And if I can convince enough people that that color on those trees is blue and not green, and that people that insist that it's green are lying, I've created a reality that benefits whatever need I might have for insisting the leaves are blue. And I know these examples aren't terrific, but it's part of my thought process around this and where I'm going to go in future episodes here. One of the things that I've gotten the most out of in my sobriety and in redoing the 12 steps is how wavering truth can be and how difficult it is to accept that something we thought all along to be true wasn't. And I think the biggest areas that we see this is in relationships. Oftentimes people break up, and when you find out what really was going on inside the mind or heart of the person, you come to a point where you realize, oh my gosh, this isn't what I thought was true at all. What do we do about this? We can't ask a group of people to create truth because what we get is their truth. And quite honestly, that's what's been happening for generations. In this book, Whose Story Is This? It's a very feminist-based book. And what I'm gleaning from it and what makes sense to me is how, when you look at the differences in thought process between men and women, and then add to that the racial background or the ethnic background of the men and the women, for the most part, truth has been dictated by white men. So I'm not going to trash white men because I know a whole bunch of amazing white men. But when that's the accepted version of truth, then anything that varies from it is considered untrue. And so truth now becomes easily manipulated. You want people to believe you, tell them they're wrong, and give them a list of reasons why they're wrong. You get marginalized communities. You have the race piece, the white skin piece, and making anyone else not true. I mean, let's make Jesus a white guy, right? We recreate the reality. And I know I'm going to anger people and I apologize, but we recreate the reality to suit our narratives. That piece comes into play quite a bit, but the gender piece comes into play. So, regardless of what you want to believe about gender, you cannot change the fact that physically speaking, biologically speaking, the functions of our bodies and why we're here and how we got here, egg body, sperm body, meat make new human, right? Those two bodies are made for very different things and they think differently. So if you put a whole group of people in the woods and they have to survive now, very quickly the strengths that female bodied people have and the strengths that male bodied people have will eventually set apart those two realms. And tasks and jobs will essentially be divided by gender. Within that, let's have gender as a Venn diagram. You've got those people in the middle, the women that have a lot of male qualities, the men that have a lot of female qualities. There's always overlap in these things. Nothing in life I'm finding is black and white, except black and white. But everything exists in the gray, which we also talked about in the 12 steps. It is very, very common for white male thought process to dictate reality. You look at all of the presidents of the United States, they have all been white men except Barack Obama. And his skin color and his heritage has been used against him again and again and again. You look at leadership positions. We'll stick with politics for now. A strong-voiced male candidate is lauded for his ability to lead, and a strong-voiced female candidate is unhinged and angry at the world and untrustworthy. We assign very different expectations based on the gender in which we live. And sadly, the white male version of reality has really controlled the Western world. When you go into other countries, the entire continent of Africa, the white control there is not native to Africa. It comes from other countries seeking to control the native Africans. So when you look at tribal culture, when you look at Southeast Asia and Asian culture, when you look at South America and jungle culture, when you get away from the white male Western world, yes, male and female expectations are different, but they're much less judged as superior than the other. People have their roles. Now, let me be clear. We could go and analyze and find a million ways that men and women are not treated the same, but that's for another day. Right now, I'm just getting into how we function on what we think is true. And so much of truth right now has been created by and written by and published by and shared by and taught by and insisted on by white men. And, school teachers for the most part were white men. So next episode, I'm going to focus on things that we were taught in school that we now know not to be true or to be a very, very skewed version of the truth. That should be an interesting one. I know that this might have been a bit rambly, but I'm building here. And mostly what I would like to share with you is that me, Barb Higgins, as a person, has spent a lot of my life not really having a clue what's true and what isn't, and wanting desperately to believe what people tell me and clinging to what people say to me as truth, because then I'll be safe and I'll survive. And then when I start to see that that person is no different than the last person I clung to, I quickly try to find someone new. And so much of this behavior can be attributed to what I was shown to be true as a child, that what I saw and what my tummy told me was true was oftentimes squelched and denied. And I was told that that isn't really how that manifests. That's not really what that means. No, you shouldn't pull your pants down in front of your friends, but as your caregiver, I'll pull them down and then I'll tell you not to tell anybody. That's a pretty harsh manipulation of truth, of right and wrong, of what's okay and what isn't. I have a ton of that. When my mother would go off on the weekends with Tom and I was told to keep it a secret, and then I knew I was going to be home alone with my mother someplace that I'm quite sure my dad knew where she was, and I would be the one that would suffer for that. I made up reasons to stay overnight at people's houses and stayed without permission. I remember one time staying at my friend Chippy's house, knowing full well that her 3 cats would put me in the hospital. A week-long hospitalization was much more preferable to me than getting molested. And so I stayed the night and I got sick and I went in the hospital. That's a pretty powerful lie right there. That's me knowing that the only way to protect one aspect of myself was to create a fabrication and hurt another part of myself. This is where I'm going. The lies we tell. If you have any input that you'd like to share, I would love it. And I need to also let you know that I'm going to be very honest about how I feel about certain things based on what I believe to be true. I am not doing the podcast to convince people to believe what I believe. I'm not. I'm going to share how I feel I've been lied to and how I have lied and what I believe truth means and how variable that can be. How simple books like The Four Agreements can sometimes make life all the much better. Or Mr. Rogers telling us to look for the helpers. Or, to not say or do anything unless you know it can be helpful. There you go, right? All these little things we learn in kindergarten to help us get along with one another. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Be good to yourself. Once you're good to yourself, be good to someone else. And as always, have a good day, everybody.
Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.